Are you selling your house for the first time? Whether this is your first time selling your house or the fifth time, it is always helpful to understand all the terms that make up the purchase agreement. Let's break it down together. Simple, clear, and straight to the point. Here are the most important terms you will encounter in almost every home sale. The purchase price. This is the amount the buyer agrees to pay for your home. It may sound really simple, but it is a very complex process, and the buyer normally base their purchase price based on the market condition. And that is going to be based on if the market is moving fast, and that usually happens when inventory is low and there is a big buyer demand. Or if the market is moving slow, and that usually happens when there is more inventory, more homes for sale, and less buyers. And the purchase price is determined by the comparables in the area. And all my buyers, before they write an offer on a property, I educate them really well on the pricing in that neighborhood by providing them most recent sales in the neighborhood. And based on the comparables which I show them, they make a decision on the price that they will offer to the home seller. As for my home sellers and listings, I price my listings very, very well, again, based on the most recent sales in the neighborhood. After the purchase price, you will see the close of escrow date. This is the day ownership officially transfers from you to the buyer. It is often set to 30 days, but that is negotiable. In some situations, home buyers and sellers agree on closing in 21 days, in 2 weeks, or even in some situations, a home can close in a week. And that is, of course, happens when the buyer finances the purchase with an all-cash offer. But if the buyer requires financing from a lender, it normally takes 21 to 30 days to close. Next comes the initial deposit amount. And customary, this is 3% of the purchase price, but it is negotiable. Next is the loan amount, and that is the loan amount that the buyer will borrow from the bank to finance the purchase. The next term is the buyer broker compensation fees, and that became part of the purchase contract where the buyer agent put their fees in the contract and they request that amount to be paid by the seller and negotiate that the seller pays the buyer broker compensation fee. Next, I will go over all the terms and the conditions that has to be met for the sale to go through. The first contingency is the loan contingency, which is the financing the buyer will need to finance the purchase, and customary in the contract that defaults to 17 days. It is negotiable. It can be made less or more. The next contingency is the appraisal contingency, and the appraisal is the inspection that is done by the bank appraiser. The bank is the lender that finances the purchase for the buyer. They will send an appraiser to appraise the house and provide this report to the lender. And based on the value that the appraiser came up with in their report, the bank will finance the purchase. And the next contingencies are the investigation of the property, and that does include the inspections, property, termite, home, roof, and the pool inspection if there was a pool in the house, finding a home insurance, the review of the seller's documents, which are the seller's disclosures, the title report, and that is looking over the preliminary title report and see if there is any liens on the seller's property other than the loan that they have, because the loan that the seller has from the lender on their house is considered a lien. If the home seller had a leased solar, that also will be considered a lien. Also, in the terms, the buyer will specify what is the date of possession, which means what is the day that they want to take possession of the property. And again, customary, it is the closing date, or they could specify a different date, but it should not be before closing. Next, it's going to be allocation of cost. And what does that mean? In the contract, we do specify who pays for what. For example, there are certain items paid for by the seller, and there are certain items that are paid for by the buyer. And by the way, those items do change from one city to the other and also different from one county to the other. So make sure you have the allocation of cost for your city or county correct. And let's go over them in details. First, the natural hazard report, optional wildfire disclosure report, and this is required if the property is in a fire zone. If it's not, this is not required. Next, the smoke alarm detectors and the water heater bracing. Those two are by law required to be paid for by the homeowner. Next is government required point of sale inspection reports. In some cities here in our area, there is a sewer inspection and it has to be done by the seller and it has to be paid by for the seller, and the sewer system has to meet certain standard and the sale will not close unless the sewer system meet those standards. Next is the escrow fee and owner title insurance policy. Customary, those are paid for by the buyer. In our area, in other areas is different. Next is the HOA preparation disclosures and HOA certification fee and HOA transfer fee. Customary, those are paid for by the seller. The whole residential purchase agreement is negotiable. Next is going to be what are the items that are excluded from the sale. So let's go over those. And here in that box, you will see all the items that if the buyer wants to include them in the sale, they will mark them that they are going to be included in the sale. Here, I have to point something very important. When I work with a home seller and they have items that will not be included in the sale, they will be excluded from the sale. I ask them to remove it before we start showing the house. For example, if you have a light fixture or a fan that is attached to your ceiling and you want to take this fixture with you to your next house, I always highly recommend that you remove it and replace it with something different that will stay with the house, because part of the contract, anything that is attached should be included in the sale. But if you remove it and replace it with something else, then the buyer did not see it, so it is not included. It's your personal item. You already took it off the ceiling and it's yours, and you replaced it with something else. I just went over the most important terms that you should look for as a home seller. Most home sellers think that the price is the only most important thing in a purchase agreement, but the terms are just as important as the sale price. Those terms and conditions are negotiable. Make sure you are working with an experienced realtor that will negotiate the best terms and conditions that will protect your best interests, and they should be knowledgeable of all the updates in the contract, because our contract does change on regular basis. This is Heba Rayyan. I am a realtor with Coldwell Banker in Danville in the East Bay, and I was a previous real estate appraiser. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you and have a great day.